Welcome to All Things Financial with Jack Driscoll. Each week, Jack takes on all things you thought were hard to understand about your finances and makes it fun, easy, but most of all interesting. From insurance to the best way to save your money and squeeze the most out of the dollars you put aside for your rainy day. And now, you have a friend in the money business. Here's your host, Jack Driscoll.
Welcome back again, everyone, to another edition of All Things Financial. I'm doing the show this week with a summer theme of some of the issues we've been running across in our office with clients' calls and different issues that are happening because or due to summer. And what I mean is summer storms, summer floods, vacations, whether to buy insurance when you're renting cars, things like this. Kids going back to school soon, so we're starting to figure out different issues with that. And one of them is, let's say college kids going back to school, we might get a question, what do we do? Do we need to buy insurance? Do we have to add the landlord onto our insurance? Are their contents covered? Are their computers covered? What about when we rent a car? Are we supposed to buy that coverage when we rent a car or waive that coverage when we rent a car? Hey, by the way, Jack, we'll get a call into the office, a tree fell on my car, is that covered? Or we'll get a call into the office, just within this last week all of these things have happened. We'll get a call into the office, hey, I see water running down due to these torrential downpours in between my house and the neighbor's house. If it comes in my house, is my property covered if it comes in the basement? So I thought I'd take this week's show and go over some of these general issues and answer some of these questions for all the rest of you who may see these things happening, have neighbors asking you, or it may be happening to yourself. Let me start with rental cars. When we go and rent a car, and I think I've touched on this on some other shows, I can't remember, so I thought I'd do it again now that it's summer. When we go in business or we go for personal reasons and rent a car, probably even applies to borrowing cars sometimes, we don't know or even think about, how are we covered if there's an accident? How are we covered if the car is vandalized? How are we covered if the car is stolen? We get out of our hotel room the next morning, the car is just missing. Whose fault is it? Who's liable for it? So when we're back up and we say, well, when we're actually renting the car, making the arrangements in advance from a rental car agency, let's say, we're always asked, and I guess maybe in a hurry, we're in a hurry at the airport, but we're asked, do you want to waive this coverage? Do you want to accept this coverage? Do you want to waive the enhanced coverage? Do you want to accept this coverage? Well, how much is it? It's $40 a day or it's $10 a day. Well, we'll waive it. We don't want to pay that. So I want to slow that down. Our typical advice as an insurance agency for years and years and years, I've been in business since 1976. My dad was in the business before me. We all learned from our insurance carriers. Most insurance carriers are similar on this, that if any car is used as a replacement of your car, the coverages that you have on your car, that car that it's replacing, is extended to any substitute vehicle. So we would say, well, I don't know which car it's covering. My whole family's on vacation. We have 3 cars. Most carriers' policies say the broadest covered car on your policy, the broadest coverages extend to a substitute car like that. So we'd say, as agents, you can waive the insurance on the rental car. So we'd save all these people money for all these years. And we were very confident as agents in giving that advice. I was in a course about 2 years ago. So yes, I'm still in courses and still training. Thank goodness for you. Because I'm in this course And the instructor says, these are advanced courses, that's true, but it's basic knowledge, we're trying to get. And I'm in this course and the instructor says, how many of you in the room advise your clients to waive the rental car insurance when they rent a car? Well, you'd think everybody's hands going up, but a lot of them didn't and a lot of them did. I'm one of them that didn't raise their hand because I don't like raising my hand in groups. So I wouldn't raise my hand no matter what the question was typically. So anyway, basically everybody in the room though, we all know, we all tell our clients, waive the coverage. You don't need to do that. You're covered. We automatically extend coverage from your policy to that other car just as if it was your own car. And we do. Almost every company, and probably every company is the same on that, but I can't speak for every company. So we're very confident in that. And the instructor says, well, let me share some stories with you, real life stories with you. Okay, fine. We already know if it's a collision, if it's a theft, if it's a vandalism, we know that rental car is covered. So what's the problem we're thinking? I'm thinking anyway. So the instructor says, what happens if your car is stolen? Your car, not even a substitute car. Say, well, if it's stolen, it's covered. And he stopped us and said, yeah, but how does that work? Isn't it true that if your car is stolen, the insurance company makes you wait 30 days to see if that car is recovered before they pay out on that car? Well, yeah. Well, they said, guess what happens when it's a rental car company? The rental car agency has in its contract that you, for renting the car, are not only liable for the damage or the loss of the car, which we are covered for, but also loss of revenue for every day that car is not available. They will, number one, the instructor taught us, whatever credit card you used to reserve the car and placed an advance on or whatever, they will immediately take that up to the max to cover as collateral for the value of the car. So if you have a $10,000 limit or $5,000 limit or whatever, the instructor says there was a case where they actually maxed out her card. It was a woman that this case pertained to. Maxed out her credit card first off, while this is being all deliberated. Number two, she is liable for lost revenue to the rental car agency for as long as it takes until they get the rental agency gets a replacement car. So we looked at that, and the instructor obviously advised us the same can happen even in a collision where it takes a week or two to fix the car. They're waiting on parts or whatever. So we learned very quickly, the instructor said, you need to think twice or three times before advising your clients to waive that coverage. And in fact, because those contracts now at the rental agencies hold customers responsible for lost revenues and lost profits, you need to tell your clients to take that coverage at the rental car agency. So there's some news for you during the summer. Shocking news for us because, we all think we know it all by now. I've been in business long enough, and here we are still learning something new every day. But the reason I put this show on, the reason I put it out starting 5 or 6 years ago, why should the type of knowledge that comes to me that I come across only serve a few people or stay in my knowledge? So I decided every time I run across things through the week or through the month with my practice, I want to try to share it with everybody else. So that's my purpose for the show, as you can see. So there's one bit of important information that can be huge. There's another issue when we get into these rental cars and everything else with identity theft, identity fraud. We're running into this all over the place. And every course I go to now is addressing the issue of identity theft and identity fraud. I told you before on shows, my son came to me. He went to a course probably 7 or 8 years ago And there was actually a speaker there. It wasn't a course, I think it was a luncheon actually. And they had a speaker there, I think from the FBI, I'm not sure. So he comes back to my office. This is about 7 years ago maybe. And he comes back to my office and he says, "Hey Dad, we need to add identity theft coverage onto everybody's homeowner's policy." And I said, "Who told you that?" And he said, "I was at this luncheon and the speaker was there and he said this identity theft and identity fraud is really important." And I said, "Brian, I go to those meetings all the time. They're hyping things up. They're trying to get people to, either buy more coverages or whatever. I don't buy it, Brian. It could happen, but I don't see it." So this is me talking to him like 7 years ago. It's within a month, and I'm not kidding, within a month. It might have only been 3 weeks. I have a client sitting in front of me and she expresses to me, "You won't believe what happened to me." And I said, "What?" She said, "I'm $10,000 in legal fees and still going. It's been a mess. It's been 6 months or 8 months so far. What happened is somebody got a hold of my credit card information and my ID." And I said, "What do you mean your ID?" She said, "I don't know. It wasn't from, like my physical driver's license, but they got my ID, my identification information, recreated my identification, changed addresses, established credit, purchased in their own name." And I've gone through this in other shows, but because it happened right after my son told me this, and after I scoffed at him and said, they're making a big deal about it, here she is telling me it's $10,000 and more, and there's no coverage anywhere. Because I told my son, "Don't worry about it. The credit cards, anytime somebody comes and puts a fraudulent charge on, their credit cards will waive it." Boy, was I wrong. So here this lady said the same thing. "Yeah, the credit cards waived it. That was the least of my problems." She said, "How do you clear up your credit? The credit is ruined on me because of all the problems that this other person applied for credit, didn't pay anything, defaulted on who knows what." So it's credit fraud. Identity fraud is different than identity theft, et cetera, et cetera. So wow, did I wake up. And she was still in the nightmarish situation of paying attorneys because there was no one else. She says, "Yeah, the credit card companies waived it, but what about all the attorney fees? I have to regain my identity. They used my social security number everywhere, and I don't even know where else," she said. So yeah, I go to my son and say, "Yeah, you were right. I was wrong. This is serious. I just didn't know it, but you're right." And of course, since then, that was 7 years ago, it's all over the place. So these are huge issues. So what you do is you call your insurance agent, you ask, number one, "What about this rental cars?" And I'm going to tell you, if they didn't go to the advanced courses I have, you're going to get the same answer I would have given you before. And that answer is, don't take the coverage. And I'm telling you, they won't know about this information. So you cannot trust the information just because you're hearing it, because I'm telling you from those advanced courses, there aren't many agents at any stage in their career that are still going to the advanced courses. So you need to be careful here. The identity theft, you can add identity theft and identity fraud coverage onto a homeowner's policy. It's very inexpensive. So you need to go out and do that. Call our office if you want us to go through and give you a thorough analysis of all your coverages and circumstances, and we'll be glad to do that as a second opinion. When you've got kids going to college, we get another question. And the question is, do I need to do anything? My kids are going to school. Well, the general information on a general extension on a homeowner's policy would be, I don't know, let's think this through. First, you're taking things up to college, personal possessions. So we go to the contents coverage of the homeowner's policy and we say, are we covered if these contents are anywhere else? If the child or the student is still our dependent, are they still treated as if they're in the house? Are the contents up at State College or Indiana University of Pennsylvania or Iowa or Texas still covered once they leave our premises? Because our homeowner's policy is in the parent's name. It's not in the kid's name. And the homeowner's policy says we cover the dwelling located at so-and-so address. We cover the contents located at so-and-so address. So we move the contents from so-and-so address down there for how long? A year. So we read the homeowner's policies, and you will find in most policies up to 10% of your contents coverage can be applied or extended to another location if it's a temporary location used by a resident of the household, it might say. And the student normally is still your dependent, still a permanent resident of your household, temporarily residing in a dorm room or an apartment. So normally you will find that coverage extension will apply. So it applies to jewelry, it applies to contents, it applies to bedding and furniture and clothing, computers. Now remember, computers, we used to have worry about computers, now it's really the cell phones. So your question's going to be, if someone steals the cell phones, are they compromised? If someone comes into the room and vandalizes? So get to your insurance agents, find out how your particular policy applies, but do this in advance. Now I also had a situation where I was told the landlord of a house with 8 students in this house, renting a house, is requiring each student to buy their own renter's insurance and liability insurance. And you're going to run into this. And name the landlord as additional insured. So or an additional named insured, depending on what the landlord is requiring. So you look at this and you say, wait a minute. Are you asking each student, 8 students in the house, to buy 8 separate renter's insurances, each in their name, 8 separate liability insurance coverages, each in their name, and the landlords are all saying, yes, everybody has to buy their own? Folks, you may not have any choice to get around that. The renter's insurance for each kid might only be $80 a year, $120 a year, I don't know. So it's not really expensive, but why can't somebody issue one renter's policy with all 8 kids on it? So when you go and negotiate these leases, talk to your insurance agents before you go. And ask the insurance agents, if we negotiate one lease with all 8 kids separately, liable, that's how they'll do it. But if we can negotiate that one renter's insurance policy for all of the kids' contents is covered in their liability, can we find a company that'll put all 8 kids on one policy? I bring that up first because that's kind of hard to find. And secondly, I bring it up because if what I just said a minute ago is true, that the parent's homeowners automatically extends 10% of the overall contents for each student, why is any renter's insurance necessary, right? Only because the landlord requires it. Because typically all 8 students, if they are dependents of their parents or their families, and the families have a homeowner's policy with contents on it and liability, typically you will find all of them are automatically covered already for all of their contents that they've moved there, just as it would have been covered in their own home, and whatever exclusions would have applied while they were in their own home still apply at this other location. And the personal liability of the student typically would also be picked up the same way it would be under the homeowner's policy at home, even while they're living somewhere else. So the reality of the situation is no renter's insurance may be necessary. No liability insurance may be necessary because they're both already covered on their parents' homeowners, except for the fact that the landlord is requiring it. And if so, see if you can get a group policy rather than in each student's family having to spend $100 or $120 times 8. So there's $1,000 versus 0. So there's one issue on the college. Here's another issue, and this is all summer related that I wanted to go over with you. Here's another issue. Trees falling are trees in the winds the high winds that we've had, if a tree falls, is it covered? Well, we get into that. Different companies handle that differently. Some say it has to have been your fault. Others say as long as the tree hits covered property, even a fence or personal property, a wagon or a bike, or structures, a house or a shed, they will cover not only the damage done to the shed or whatever, but also removal of the tree. Other companies say if the tree falls on its own out in the yard and didn't damage anything, they will cover removal of the tree. And thirdly, many companies will say if the tree fell out in the yard and did not damage anybody's property, they will not cover removal of the tree. So you need to, every policy and every company handles that one differently. If it falls on a car, that's not covered property under homeowners. So think about that. If it falls on a car, that's actually car insurance. So does a tree on a car, will they pay for removal of the tree? That's a combination of will the homeowners pay for it or will the car insurance pay for it? So that's a claim we got this week. So I'm sharing it with you. Why don't you pick up the phone and find out in advance? Hey, are we covered or do we need endorsements that we're not covered, but if we did have this endorsement, we would be covered. Maybe we want to add it. But here's the biggie. In the summer, water, floods. We're nowhere near a river or a stream, you might say. We're almost up on top of a hill or halfway down a hill. If we get flooded, you'd say, it's Noah's Ark time. And everybody tells me that all the time. But in those same neighborhoods, once every 10 or once every 20 years, we get a torrential downpour. The ground can't absorb the water. We get raging rapids running down the hill in between the houses because the water, it's surface water, not from a river, but from the rain. So it's not backup that came up the hill because water rose so high. It's just this raging rapids from these storms, these flash storms. But the question is, water came into my basement and it filled it up 2 feet and had nowhere to go because it came in from the surface through the windowsill or through the basement door. What can we do? Are we covered? The answer on a homeowner's policy, in almost every case, no, you are not covered. So I thought I'd clear this up. Should you buy flood insurance? If you want covered for that, you have to have flood insurance because there's no other coverage that will cover ground or surface waters. If you want covered for backup of water through sewers, that you can buy on a homeowner's policy. But if you want coverage for surface waters coming in, you need flood insurance for that. Some homeowners' policies can add a flood insurance endorsement and others can't, so you have to go to the National Flood Insurance Association and buy it separately from the Government Association. The other water we get in basements, especially after torrential downpours or heavily saturated ground, is seepage of water through basement walls. We get it all the time in Pittsburgh. Folks, listen, there's no policy or no coverage I know of anywhere that we could buy for that coverage. Homeowners' policies will cover backup of water through sewers if we endorse that. Flood insurance will cover flood surface waters. Folks, there's no homeowners policy, there's no flood insurance policy, and there's no other insurance policy I know of. Remember I said I learned something new every day? Folks, I'm counting on you. Help me out with this, please. Someone give me a call or an email. Here's where you can get coverage for water seeping in through basement walls because in 40 years I can't find it, but I would love to find it. So I need your help. Anybody out there that can stand me corrected, help me learn something new this day, I would very much appreciate that because I can't find it and never have anywhere. All right, folks, that's enough for our summer show, our summer risks and perils show here that I wanted to share some information with you. Hope you're enjoying a nice summer. Otherwise, I'll be back again next week with another edition of All Things Financial.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Inc., member FINRA SIPC, and registered investment advisor. Insurance services offered through Driscoll Insurance and Financial Services Inc., which is not affiliated with SagePoint Financial Inc.